The boy stood frozen in the hallway, his small hands clutched tight around a thin notebook, as if it were the only shield he had left. The classroom door had just slammed in his face, and the sharp sound echoed through the corridor like a cruel judgment. The teacher's words still burned in his ears. "You do not belong here, go back and stay out." Her voice had been filled with disdain, her finger pointing like a knife, and the children inside had laughed, some out of fear of her authority, some out of the comfort of not being the target themselves. The boy's cheeks burned red, not from anger but from shame. He lowered his head, trying to hide the sting in his eyes. He was only 8, yet he already knew the weight of humiliation. He pressed his back against the cold wall of the hallway, hoping no one else would see him, hoping the moment would vanish. If he stayed still long enough, but footsteps were approaching, firm, steady, confident footsteps that belonged to someone who did not belong. In this building it was the millionaire who had come to the school unannounced. His presence was unusual, but no one questioned him. Because his wealth commanded respect, he had come looking for someone else, a meeting with the principal, about a donation. Perhaps, but what he saw stopped him in his tracks. His eyes landed on the small boy standing there, trembling alone, barred from his own education. The notebook hugged to his chest like a final plea for dignity. The millionaire's chest tightened. His jaw clenched. He had seen many things in his life: betrayal in boardrooms, greed among friends, envy dressed as loyalty, but there was something about cruelty to a child that pierced deeper than all of it. He stepped closer, each stride echoing. Against the polished floor, the boy looked up, startled, his eyes wide with the mix of fear and desperate hope. "What happened here?" The millionaire's voice was calm but heavy, like thunder before a storm. The boy opened his mouth, but no words came. Only silence broken by the faint laughter still spilling from inside the classroom. The teacher appeared again, her face stern, her lips twisted into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "This boy does not belong here, sir," she said, her tone polite. Now, because she recognized who stood before her, "He is slow, he does not fit in with the others. He drags them down." The millionaire's eyes narrowed. He looked from the boy to the teacher, and back again. Something flickered deep within him, a memory of his own childhood when he too had been shoved aside, dismissed, told he was not good enough. A teacher had once said similar words to him, and he had carried that scar until he fought his way out of poverty, with nothing but will and fury. The boy still said nothing, his silence louder than any protest, his knuckles white around the notebook. The millionaire bent down, meeting him eye to eye. "What is in your hand?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, then slowly opened the cover. Inside were pages filled with drawings, rough sketches of machines, houses, bridges, ideas, scribbled in pencil, crude yet filled with imagination. The millionaire felt a shock run through him. He saw not failure but potential. The teacher's voice cut through like ice. "Meaningless doodles," she scoffed. "He wastes time on nonsense instead of learning. He is disruptive." The millionaire stood slowly, his height casting a shadow across her face. "Nonsense," he repeated, his voice now carrying a sharp edge. "These are the marks of a mind that refuses to be caged, and you call it nonsense." The hallway fell silent. Even the muffled laughter from the children inside seemed to fade. The teacher shifted uncomfortably, but held her ground. "Rules are rules, sir. Not everyone can succeed. Some are meant to fall behind." The millionaire turned his gaze on her, and for the first time her confidence wavered. He spoke not with rage, but with conviction. "Every child has the right to be seen, to be heard, to be given a chance. When you decide who belongs and who does not, you are not teaching, you are destroying." The boy's eyes filled with tears, not just from the cruelty he had endured, but from the strange warmth in the man's voice. No one had ever spoken for him like this before. He had always been invisible, until now. The millionaire placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "You will come with me," he said quietly. And in that moment the boy felt the weight of years of humiliation begin to shift ever so slightly, as if the chains had been loosened. But he also felt fear, because leaving meant stepping into the unknown behind them. Whispers began to rise from other teachers down the hall, from students peeking through the cracked door. "Why is the millionaire here? What is he doing with that boy? What will happen next?" Curiosity and unease spread like fire, because everyone knew when someone like him made a stand, nothing stayed the same. The teacher's face hardened again. She tried to reclaim her authority. "You cannot just take him. He is my student, and this is my classroom." The millionaire turned his gaze toward her with an expression that froze her where she stood. "No," he said, his voice like a final judgment. "He is not your student anymore." The boy clutched his notebook tighter, his mind racing with questions. Where would this man take him? Why did he care what would happen to him tomorrow? But none of those questions had answers. Yet all he knew was that the door that had just been slammed in his face might not be the end after Oland. As the millionaire guided him down the hallway past the shocked faces of teachers and students alike, the boy's trembling steps began to steady because something had changed, something irreversible, and though he did not know it yet, this was only the beginning of a story that would shake everyone who thought they knew the truth. The last thing the boy heard before the hallway turned silent behind them was the teacher's voice, trembling not with authority now, but with fear. "What are you going to do with him, sir?" And the millionaire, without turning his head, answered something that made every listener shiver with anticipation. "I will give him the chance no one ever gave me." And with those words, the story opened wide like a wound waiting to bleed into the world, a wound that would expose betrayal, cruelty, hidden secrets, and a stand that no one expected. The door had been closed on the boy, but now another had opened, one that would lead to truths no one was ready for, one that would test not just him but everyone around him. And so the question that now hung heavy in the air was simple: what happens next? The boy walked beside the millionaire, his small steps struggling to keep up with the tall strides that carried a weight of both authority and quiet fury, the notebook still pressed against his chest like a shield. The school hallways buzzed behind them, teachers whispering, children staring. The silence between the two stretched heavy until they reached the entrance doors. Sunlight spilled across the polished floor, and for the first time that morning the boy felt warmth instead of cold. Rejection outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh grass and city smoke. The millionaire stopped, turned, and looked down at the boy, his eyes steady yet softened with something the boy could not name, not pity. Something else, something that felt like recognition. He bent down and asked, "Tell me your name." The boy hesitated, as if saying, "It might cause another punishment." "Then," whispered Jacob. The millionaire nodded. "Jacob," he repeated firmly, as if the name itself deserved to be spoken with respect. He placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "You have been wronged, but wrongs can be turned into fire, and fire can build or destroy it. Depends on the hands that hold it." Jacob's eyes widened at the words. He did not fully understand them, but he felt them deep in his chest. They walked toward the black car waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door, his expression carefully blank, but his eyes darted toward Jacob with curiosity. The boy climbed in nervously, gripping the seat. The car pulled away, leaving the school shrinking behind them. Jacob felt a knot of both fear and wonder. Where were they going? Why was this stranger helping him? The millionaire leaned back, his gaze fixed outside the window, yet his mind was elsewhere. He remembered being Jacob's age, small, mocked, ridiculed for being poor. He remembered drawing plans in the dirt, dreaming of machines that would never be built, until he clawed his way through cruelty and betrayal. His rise had been fueled by rage, but looking at Jacob he wondered if rage was the only fuel a child deserved. Jacob broke the silence, his voice barely audible. "Why did you help me?" The millionaire turned his head, and for a moment the boy thought he saw sadness behind the strength. "Because he said no one helped me when I needed it." Jacob's hands tightened on the notebook. He thought of the teacher's words, how he was a failure, a burden, and now he wondered, could it be that someone as powerful as this man had once felt the same? The car stopped in front of a towering glass building, sunlight gleaming against its surface. Jacob's mouth fell open. The letters above the entrance spelled a name known across the city, a name tied to wealth, power, and influence: the Millionaire's Company. Jacob's heart pounded as he followed him. Inside, the lobby was filled with polished marble and rushing workers, but all eyes turned when they saw who entered and who walked beside him. The secretary rose. "At once, sir," she said quickly. "You have a meeting in 10 minutes. Shall I prepare?" But he raised his hand. "Not now. This is more important." Jacob blinked at the words, more important than business, more important than money. What could that mean? They entered an elevator that rose smoothly to the top floors. When the doors opened, Jacob stepped into an office larger than his entire home. Walls of glass revealing the city below, shelves lined with books and models of inventions. Jacob's eyes locked on the models, machines, bridges, vehicles, each one crafted with precision. His heart raced because they looked like the things he had sketched in his notebook. The millionaire noticed his gaze. "You like these?" he asked. Jacob nodded quickly, his eyes shining. "They are beautiful," he whispered, then held up his notebook. "Mine are not like this." The millionaire took the notebook, gently flipped through the rough sketches, and smiled. "They are exactly like this," he said. "They are ideas, and every great building starts as a rough line on paper." Jacob stared at him, struggling to believe the words. No one had ever praised his drawings before the millionaire closed the notebook and placed it carefully on his desk. Listen to me, Jacob, what happened today was not about rules or education, it was about cruelty. There are people who believe they can crush others. To feel powerful, your teacher is one of them. But I tell you this, you are not weak, you are not a mistake, you are possibility. Tears welled in Jacob's eyes. He wiped them quickly, afraid to look weak, but the millionaire's voice softened. It is not weakness to feel, Jacob, it is strength to keep walking after the world tries to break you. A knock came at the door. An assistant peeked in her face. Pale, sir, the school principal is on the line. He demands to know why you removed a student. The millionaire's eyes darkened. Tell him I will speak later, and when I do it will not be a request. The door closed again. Silence returned. Jacob felt a shiver. He realized this man was not just rich, he was feared, respected even by those who tried to challenge him. But why would someone like him care for a boy no one wanted? Jacob asked quietly, are you going to send me back? The millionaire stared him long and hard, then shook his head. No, Jacob, not back, never back. Forward, always forward. The words echoed in Jacob's mind. Forward, always forward. He clutched them like a lifeline. He looked at the office again, at the machines, at the city stretching beyond the windows. He wondered if his life could truly change, if he could escape the shadows of humiliation. But deep inside, a whisper of doubt remained. People did not change. So easily teachers could lie, schools could betray. What if this too was a dream that would vanish by morning? The millionaire saw the doubt. He leaned forward and said, Jacob, every person you meet will try to put you in a box too small for your soul. You must decide whether to stay or to break it. I can give you tools. I can give you a chance, but the choice will always be yours. Jacob nodded slowly, his young mind spinning with more questions than answers, but one truth stood firm. This was the first time someone had believed in him. As night fell, the millionaire arranged a room for Jacob in his mansion. The boy lay in a bed, softer than any he had known, staring at the ceiling. Sleep far away, his heart full of confusion and fear, yet also hope. Back at the school, the teacher sat alone in the empty classroom, her face pale, her hands trembling. She had thought herself untouchable, but now whispers spread through the staff room. What if the millionaire exposed her? What if her career ended? She clenched her fists. No, she thought she would not let a child and a stranger ruin her. She would find a way to fight back. Jacob's story was only beginning, but already shadows gathered. On the horizon, shadows of revenge, betrayal and secrets waiting to surface, because when power is challenged, it never falls quietly. It strikes back. And as Jacob finally closed his eyes, his notebook on the table beside him, one question remained heavy in the air. What price would he pay for the chance he had just been given? The morning sun poured through tall windows in the mansion, and Jacob awoke to a silence that felt unreal. The sheets around him were soft and warm, unlike the thin blanket. At his old home he sat up, blinking at the strange room, the polished furniture, the books stacked on a shelf, the city skyline glowing beyond the glass. It all felt like a dream too fragile to last. He reached for his notebook on the table, clutching it as if it alone could anchor him in this strange new world. The door opened quietly, and a maid entered with a tray of breakfast. Her eyes softened when she saw Jacob sitting upright, holding the notebook so tightly. She set the tray down gently and whispered, "You are safe here, child. Eat something, you must be hungry." Jacob nodded slowly, his small hands trembling as he picked up a piece of bread. He had never seen so much food laid before him: eggs, fruit, milk. It felt overwhelming. The maid smiled kindly and left, but Jacob could not shake the fear that at any moment someone would barge in and tell him it was all a mistake. Not long after the millionaire entered his presence, filling the room like a wave, Jacob looked up, startled, and quickly stood, clutching the notebook to his chest. "Good morning, Jacob," the man said, his voice steady. "Did you sleep well?" Jacob nodded. "Yes, sir, thank you." The millionaire studied him carefully, then said, "Today, I will show you something different. Come with me." They drove across the city, passing crowded streets and towering buildings, until they reached a quiet part of town. The car stopped outside a rundown building, its bricks cracked windows dusty. Jacob frowned, confused. This place looked abandoned. The millionaire stepped out and Jacob followed inside. They found a room filled with children his age, some even younger, sitting at wooden tables, bent over books and paper, their clothes worn, their faces tired, but their eyes alive with curiosity. "This is my foundation," the millionaire explained, "a place for children who were denied chances like you." Jacob's eyes widened. He had never seen so many children like him, each carrying a shadow of rejection, and yet here they were, learning, drawing, building things with their own hands. The millionaire watched Jacob closely. This is where you will learn, not in schools that humiliate, but in places that believe. One of the children, a girl with messy hair, looked up at Jacob with a curious smile. She was sketching something on paper, a house with strange shapes. Jacob sat beside her timidly. She asked, "What do you draw?" Jacob hesitated, then slowly opened his notebook, showing the pages. Her eyes widened. "Wow, that is amazing," she whispered. No one had ever said that to him before, not even once. The millionaire stood in the corner watching the moment, his chest tightening. He remembered how he had once sat at a similar table, invisible, until he forced the world to see him. Perhaps Jacob would not have to fight the same war alone. Hours passed. Jacob worked alongside the other children, his fear fading, replaced with a strange warmth. He began to laugh softly. When they laughed, he began to speak. When they spoke, his heart opening in ways he never thought possible. But in the back of his mind lingered the teacher's face, twisted with cruelty, her voice declaring he did not belong. Back at the school, that very teacher was plotting her next move. She sat with the principal, her voice sharp. "We cannot allow this man to humiliate our institution. We must remind him that rules are rules." The principal, nervous, nodded. "But you know who he is, his influence, his power." She narrowed her eyes. "Then let him play savior for now, but everything has a cost. The boy will become his weakness, and weaknesses can always be used." That evening, Jacob returned to the mansion, tired yet alive. He sat in the grand study with the millionaire, who poured himself a glass of water and asked, "Tell me, Jacob, what did you learn today?" Jacob thought carefully, then said, "I learned I am not alone. I learned maybe my drawings are not just nonsense." The millionaire smiled. "That is the first step, believing your mind has value." Jacob looked down at his notebook, then whispered, "But what if they come back for me? What if they say, I cannot stay here?" The millionaire's expression hardened. "Then they will answer to me." But even as he said the words, a shadow crossed his thoughts, because he knew the world was ruthless. It never allowed change without resistance, and he knew people like that teacher and her allies would not surrender their cruelty without striking back. Later that night, Jacob wandered through the halls, unable to sleep. He stopped before a large portrait hanging above the fireplace. It showed a young boy, thin and ragged, standing in a field beside a broken shack, his eyes hollow yet defiant. Jacob stepped closer. The resemblance struck him. The millionaire entered silently behind him, his voice low. "That was me, a long time ago." Jacob turned in shock. "You, sir?" "Yes," the man nodded. "I was told I was worthless. I was beaten down, mocked, denied, but I refused to break. And now, I will make sure you do not have to fight." Jacob felt a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to believe it, but fear still whispered that happiness never lasted. The millionaire placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You will face trials, Jacob, greater than you imagine, but promise me this: never let the world tell you who you are. You must decide that for yourself." Jacob nodded, his small voice trembling. "I promise." Outside the mansion gates, a figure lingered in the shadows. It was the teacher, her eyes burning with anger. She had followed. She had seen. She pulled out her phone, whispering into it, "He took him. The boy is with him. We cannot let this stand." The voice on the other end, cold and deliberate, replied, "Then we will give him a reason to regret us." Jacob finally drifted to sleep. He dreamed of bridges rising from rivers of fire, machines that flew across skies filled with storm, his drawings coming alive. But his dreams soon twisted into darkness, the teacher's face rising from the shadows, laughter echoing, chains pulling him back. He woke with a gasp, sweat on his face, the notebook still clutched in his hand. In the quiet of the night, one thought pressed heavy in his mind. If people could destroy him once, they could try again. And if they did, he wondered, would the millionaire truly be able to protect him? Or would Jacob have to find the strength to stand on his own? The city slept, unaware that a war of wills was about to unfold, a war between cruelty and compassion, between a boy once silenced and the man who refused to let silence win. And though neither Jacob nor the millionaire knew it, yet betrayal was already moving closer, waiting for the moment to strike. The next day began with a tension that Jacob could feel even before he left his room. The mansion seemed quieter. The staff moved with hushed voices. The air carried something sharp, something uneasy. Jacob clutched his notebook and walked toward the study where the millionaire sat by the window, his eyes scanning papers, yet his mind clearly elsewhere. Jacob hesitated at the doorway until the man looked up and gave a small nod. "Come in." Jacob stepped forward and asked softly, "Is something wrong?" The millionaire leaned back, his expression unreadable there. are people who do not like what I did for you, he said, carefully. Jacob's chest tightened. The teacher, he whispered. Yes, the man confirmed her. And others, they are angry because I refuse to let them control your future, but anger is not what I fear. It is what they may do with it. The words weighed heavy on Jacob. He thought of the teacher's cold smile, the way she had dismissed him. As if he were nothing, he asked timidly, will they come for me again? The millionaire's eyes hardened. Perhaps, he said, but if they do, they will find I am not so easily broken that afternoon. Jacob returned with him to the foundation. The children greeted him warmly, their laughter filling the room. Jacob felt lighter sitting among them, sketching ideas and sharing thoughts, but as he worked, he noticed a strange man standing by the door, watching. Not a teacher, not one of the usual staff, his suit too sharp, his eyes to cold. Jacob's small hand tightened on the pencil. The millionaire noticed, too. He excused himself quietly and confronted the man outside. The voices rose in the hall, sharp, low, filled with threats. Though Jacob could not make out all the words, he heard enough. The word lawsuit, the word scandal, the word scandal, the word boy, repeated with venom. When the door opened again, the strange man was gone, but the millionaire's face was dark. Jacob did not dare ask what had been said that evening. The storm arrived. Jacob and the millionaire returned home only to find reporters gathered outside, cameras, flashing voices shouting questions. Who is the boy? Why did you remove him from school? Is he your son? Is this charity or scandal? Jacob froze, trembling, as microphones pushed near his face. The millionaire pulled him close, shielding him with one arm, and spoke firmly. No comment. The driver forced the car through the chaos, and the gates closed behind them. Inside, Jacob's heart pounded. What do they want from me? He asked, his voice breaking. The millionaire knelt in front of him, holding his shoulders. Listen, Jacob, they want a story. They want to twist truth into lies because lies sell, but we will not let them decide your worth. Jacob looked into his eyes, desperate. How can I fight them? I am just a boy. The millionaire's voice grew firm then. You fight by refusing to disappear. Night fell heavy and Jacob could not sleep. He sat at the desk, sketching lines that shook with fear, machines that cracked apart, bridges that collapsed halfway. He tore page after page until the notebook thinned. Frustration burning in his chest, he slammed it shut and whispered, maybe they were right, maybe. I do not belong. The words echoed in the empty room like a crystal. Door creaked open. The millionaire stepped inside, quietly saw the torn pages scattered. Across the floor he walked over, picked up one page, studied the broken drawing and said, this is not failure, Jacob, this is honesty. This is how the world feels to you right now. Broken, half-finished, uncertain, and that makes it true. Jacob stared at him, tears stinging his eyes. The man placed the page back on the desk and said, but broken things can be built again. Even stronger. Remember that. The next morning news spread across the city. The teacher had spoken to the press, her face on the screen, declaring the millionaire had kidnapped a student, that Jacob was unstable, disruptive, a danger to others. Jacob watched in horror as her words painted him as a monster. Children laughed in the background of the broadcast. Parents demanded answers. Turned to the millionaire, his voice trembling. She is destroying me. The man's eyes blazed. Then we will answer, not with words but with truth. That day he arranged a gathering in the foundation hall. Reporters invited, teachers summoned. Jacob stood at the front, his knees shaking, the millionaire at his side. The cameras flashed as the man spoke calmly. You accused this boy of being a burden, of being worthless. Look here. He lifted Jacob's notebook and opened it for all to see, page after page. Of machines and bridges and dreams. These are the thoughts of a mind that refuses to stay silent. And you call it nothing. The room buzzed. Reporters leaned forward. The teacher's face turned pale, anger flashing in her eyes. She shouted, those are scribbles, meaningless. The millionaire turned to Jacob. Speak, he whispered. Jacob's throat tightened, but he looked out at the sea of faces, and something inside him stirred. He remembered the laughter, the humiliation, the closed door. He felt the weight of every cruel word, and he found his voice. I only wanted to learn, he said, his voice shaking but clear. I only wanted a chance. You told me I was nothing, but I am not nothing. I am me, and I will not stop drawing, even if the world laughs, even if you hate me, because these pages are mine and no one can take them. The room fell silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Jacob's chest rose and fell with the force of what he had spoken. The millionaire placed a hand on his shoulder and said, softly, that is the truth, and no lie can erase it. But though the crowd was stirred, though some reporters nodded, though whispers of admiration rose, Jacob saw the teacher slip out, her eyes dark with something worse than anger. It was promise, promise. of revenge that night. As Jacob lay in bed, he should have felt relief, but instead, he felt the storm growing heavier. The millionaire had given him strength, but strength draws enemies like blood draws wolves. He knew she was not finished. He knew that fight was far from over. And somewhere deep in the city, the teacher met with others' faces, shadowed voices, cold together. They spoke of ways to strike, not through courts, not through news, but through betrayal, something deeper, something that would cut the millionaire where it hurt most. Jacob dreamed again of chains, but this time he saw himself breaking them, each link shattering with fire. But when he turned in the dream, the fire did not just free him, it spread, consuming everything he cared about. He woke, gasping, his notebook clutched tight against his chest, his eyes staring into the dark with one burning question: what price will freedom demand from me? The next day arrived heavy with clouds, as if the sky itself carried the weight of what was coming. Jacob woke to the sound of raised voices drifting through the mansion halls. He slipped from his bed and padded quietly to the staircase, his small fingers gripping the railing below him. In the grand study, the millionaire stood, face to face with two men in dark suits, their tones sharp, their words filled with accusation. "You are meddling where you do not belong," one of them barked. "You are using that boy for your own image," the other added. "The boy should be returned to his school and his teacher." Jacob's stomach knotted, fear tightening around him. He wanted to run back to his room, hide beneath the blankets, but something inside him stopped him. He crept closer, listening. The millionaire's voice rose, deep, steady. "You think I will send him back to the hands of those who crushed him? You do not know me at all." The men left soon after, slamming the door behind them, and the mansion fell silent. Jacob hesitated, then stepped into the room, his notebook pressed against his chest. "Are they going to take me away?" he asked, his voice trembling. The millionaire turned to him, his expression softening. "They will try," he admitted, "but they will not succeed, not as long as I stand." Jacob searched his face, desperate to believe him, but the shadow in the man's eyes said the battle would not be easy. Later that afternoon, Jacob returned to the foundation, surrounded by children who welcomed him with warmth, yet the whispers of the outside world still followed. Some parents had already withdrawn their children, fearing the scandal. The teacher's lies spreading like poison. Jacob felt guilt heavy on his shoulders. Was it his fault? Were they suffering because of him? He sat at a table, staring at his drawings, unable to move his pencil across the page, until the girl with messy hair sat beside him. She looked at his notebook, then at him, and said, "Do not stop because of them. If you stop, they win." Jacob's chest ached at her words, but he nodded slowly and began to draw again, his lines shaky but alive. Meanwhile, the teacher moved in silence, weaving her net. She had allies now, not just other teachers, but people who envied the millionaire, people who whispered about his rise from poverty, about the enemies he had made along the way. She promised them, "This boy will be his downfall. Together we will strip away his mask." That evening, as Jacob sat in the mansion library, the millionaire entered with a file in his hand. He placed it gently on the table. Jacob frowned, confused. "What is it?" The man sighed. "Documents from the past. He explained things about me that they will use against us." Jacob blinked slowly, not understanding the weight of what lay inside. The man's gaze was heavy. "When you fight cruelty, Jacob, it does not fight fair. It claws at every part of your life, even the parts you buried." Jacob's heart pounded with unease. What secrets did the man hold, and how could they hurt them both? The following morning, the headlines hit like knives. Accusations of corruption, betrayal, old scandals twisted into new lies, and at the center of it all, Jacob's picture beside the millionaire's face. The boy he hides, the boy he uses. Jacob's chest burned with shame. He wanted to tear the newspapers apart, yet he could not silence the voices whispering in the streets. At school, children mocked his name. Teachers shook their heads with disdain. The teacher herself smiled in triumph and whispered to those around her, "He will not last." That night, Jacob broke down in his room. He slammed his notebook shut and cried into the pillow. "It is too much. I cannot do this. I should go back. Maybe she was right. Maybe I do not belong anywhere." The millionaire entered silently, his footsteps heavy. He sat beside Jacob without speaking until the boy's sobs quieted. Then he said softly, "When I was your age, I thought the same. I thought the world would crush me, and it nearly did. But then I realized the truth. The world only wins if you let it." Silence. Jacob lifted his tear-stained face. "But what if I am not strong enough?" The man's eyes met his, and for a moment, Jacob saw raw pain there. Then fire. "Strength is not about never falling, Jacob. It is about rising every time they push you down. You are already strong, you just do not know it." Yet the next day Jacob returned to the foundation, his head still heavy but his steps firmer. He sat before the children and opened his notebook. He began to draw, not just machines this time, but faces of children, smiling faces filled with light. His hands steady, his heart pounding as if each line was defiance, each sketch a refusal to disappear. But even as he drew, shadows gathered at the door. The teacher had come again, her face calm, her eyes cold. She stepped inside, her voice smooth. "So this is where you hide," she said. Jacob froze his pencil. Trembling, the millionaire stepped forward, placing himself between them. "You are not welcome here," his voice firm. The teacher smiled cruelly. "But I am here," she said, "because truth cannot be hidden forever. This boy will destroy you." She turned her gaze to Jacob, and whispered, "You will destroy him." Her words slithered into Jacob's mind, poisoning him with doubt. What if she was right? What if his presence would bring ruin to the man who had saved him? He clutched his notebook tighter, his chest aching. The millionaire's voice rose. "Enough, leave now, or you will regret it." The teacher's smile only widened as she turned to go, her final words sharp as blades. "Then watch him fall." That night the mansion seemed darker. Jacob could not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words repeating over and over, "You will destroy him." He sat up, opened his notebook, and scribbled frantically. Machines burning, bridges collapsing, until the pages blurred with rage. He whispered into the empty room, "Maybe I should leave. Maybe that would save him." Down the hall, the millionaire stood at the window, gazing at the city lights, his chest heavy. He had fought wars in business, in politics, in life itself. But this was different. This was personal. He had taken a stand for Jacob, and now every enemy he had ever made was sharpening their knives. He whispered to himself, "I will not lose him." The storm had reached its peak, sides drawn, enemies circling, truth twisting. Jacob torn between hope and despair, the millionaire weighed down by secrets and battles, yet neither of them knew. The final strike was near, betrayal, waiting in the shadows, preparing to rip open everything they had fought to build. And as Jacob finally drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought burned through the silence. If he stayed, he might destroy the man who believed in him. But if he left, he might destroy himself. What choice would he make when the final moment came? The night stretched heavy with silence, and Jacob tossed restlessly in his bed, unable to quiet the storm inside his chest. The teacher's words echoed again and again. "You will destroy him," and with every repetition the fear grew sharper. What if it was true? What if his presence would tear apart the man who had lifted him from the dust? Jacob pressed the notebook against his chest, whispering, "Maybe I should go. Maybe leaving is the only way to save him." But as the thought rooted itself deeper, the door creaked open, and the millionaire entered, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes steady. He walked to the window, his gaze fixed on the city lights below. Jacob watched him silently before finally speaking, his voice trembling. "Maybe I should leave. Maybe that would protect you." The man turned sharply, his eyes blazing. "Never say that. Jacob, never believe that. You are the reason I fight. You are not a burden. You are the truth that terrifies." Then Jacob felt tears sting his eyes. "But she said I would destroy you." The man's jaw clenched. "Then let them say what they will. Words cannot break me. What breaks me is the thought of you giving up." The next day, the storm erupted fully. Reporters flooded the gates. The teacher had filed a petition accusing the millionaire of manipulating Jacob, using him to polish his image. Whispers of scandal filled the air. Politicians and rivals circled like vultures, waiting to strike inside the mansion. Jacob sat small and trembling, his notebook open before him, but his pencil unmoving. He looked up at the millionaire, who was pacing the room, speaking into phones, barking orders, then pausing to breathe deeply. Jacob whispered, "Will they win?" The man stopped, and for a long moment he said nothing, then turned to Jacob with fire in his voice. "They will win only if we let fear silence us." That evening the confrontation came, the foundation hall filled with reporters, teachers, officials, and children, who watched with wide, frightened eyes. The teacher stood at the front, her voice sharp as a blade. "This man is no savior," she declared. "He is a manipulator. He parades this boy to mask his own corruption. This boy is unstable, dangerous. He should be returned to where he belongs." Jacob flinched as murmurs rose, the crowd shifting uneasily. But then the millionaire stepped forward, his voice low but carrying through the room. "I was once a boy like him, cast aside, told I would never matter. I built myself from the ashes of that cruelty, and I swore I would never let another child be broken in the same way." The teacher laughed cruelly. "Your story is not his," she spat. "He is not strong like you. He is weak." Jacob's chest burned with shame. He wanted to hide, but then he remembered the girl at the foundation who had said, "Do not stop because of them." He remembered the night the millionaire had told him strength is not about never falling, it is about rising. He felt something shift inside him, his hands trembling as he raised his notebook. Everyone turned as Jacob's small voice cut through the noise. "I am not weak," he said. "I am not dangerous. I am not nothing. I am me. I draw because it is how I breathe. I imagine because it is how I live. And if you take that from me, you take everything, but you cannot, because it is mine." The room fell silent. Jacob stepped forward, showing the pages. Machines, bridges, faces filled with life, each line a defiance. "You tried to silence me," he said, looking directly at the teacher, "but I will not be silent, not again." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The millionaire placed his hand on Jacob's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. The teacher's face twisted with fury, but she could see her power slipping. The children began to clap, one by one, then parents, then reporters, the sound swelling into a wave. She shouted over them, desperate, "You cannot let him stay with you. It will ruin you." The millionaire looked at her, and his words struck like iron then. "Ruin me, but I will not abandon him." Her mouth opened to retort, but the principal, who had stood silently at her side, now stepped forward, his face pale enough. He said, his voice breaking, "Enough lies, enough cruelty. The truth is, we failed him. You failed him." His words turned the tide. The teacher froze, her authority crumbling as whispers of anger turned toward Heron. The days that followed, the storm slowly cleared. Reports shifted from scandal to triumph. Headlines read, "Boy silenced by school now, defended by millionaire." Jacob became a symbol not of shame but of defiance. Yet even in the glow of victory, Jacob sat quietly one evening staring at his notebook. He looked up at the millionaire and whispered, "Will it ever stop? Will people ever stop trying to crush me?" The man placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "No, Jacob, the world never stops, but neither will you." Weeks passed. Jacob grew in strength, not only in his drawings but in his voice. He spoke before groups of children, telling them, "Do not let them tell you who you are." He studied at the foundation, not as an outcast, but as a leader. The millionaire watched him with pride, knowing the battle had carved scars, but also a fire that would never die. The teacher was gone, dismissed, her career in ruins, but Jacob did not celebrate. He only felt a quiet sorrow for her because he understood. Now cruelty was born from weakness, from fear, from emptiness, but he refused to let her shadow define him. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Jacob sat beside the millionaire on the balcony, the air cool, the sky glowing. Jacob asked softly, "Why me? Why did you help me?" The man was silent for a long moment, then said, "Because when I saw you, I saw myself, and I remembered how it felt to be left outside a door, and I promised I would never let another child face that alone." Jacob held his notebook close, his heart heavy, but also full of light. He looked at the city below, the endless streets, and light stretching into forever, and he whispered, "I will not stop. I will keep drawing. I will keep dreaming." The man smiled. "Forward, always forward." Jacob nodded. "Forward, always forward on." So the boy who had once been barred from a classroom door found himself standing before doors that would open to a world he had never imagined. He carried scars. He carried doubts, but he also carried fire, and he knew now that sometimes losing everything, being humiliated, being cast aside, is the only way to find who you truly are. The story was not just of a millionaire who took a stand or a teacher who tried to destroy. It was the story of a boy who learned that strength is not the absence of pain but the refusal to let pain decide his worth. It was the story of survival, betrayal, transformation, and a truth that could not be silenced in the end. Jacob closed his notebook, looked at the man beside him, and whispered, "Thank you," and the man replied, "No, Jacob, thank you for reminding me why I fought in the first place." The storm had passed, the wounds remained, but so did the lesson that sometimes the smallest voice can carry the loudest truth, and that sometimes it takes being broken to learn how unbreakable you really are. The end.